We're very pleased that you're joining us either on Rogers TV, and that's available now throughout Simcoe County tonight, or accessing on your electronic device by streaming either through the Rogers website or through the Facebook Live website. So great that you could join us. My name is Keith Rose, and I am your moderator. I'd like to introduce our illustrious panel. We have three speakers tonight. Robin, I think we all know which one's Robin. Okay, Robin Hanley Defoe is an educator, an author, a popular teacher at Trent University, a speaker, a consultant, and a mother of three. Have I missed anything, Robin?
I think that's a good start.
Okay. Glenn Robitaille. Glenn, do you want to just put up your hand so we know which one you are? Great. Glenn with the ukulele in the background. He's a trained psychotherapist, leader at Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. As well, he's a counselor and a minister and a friend to many. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Keith. Thank you.
John Playford. John's a teacher. He's been a principal. He's a well-respected educator with the Simcoe County District School Board. And he's also been on the Our Health program in the past. 3 years ago, John joined us for digital health. So, John, welcome back. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Keith.
There are more detailed biographies in the program. You can download it from the website on the last promotional material you got. And in that website, there's also links to a couple of references that you might find helpful if you haven't already read them. Some collective thank yous before we begin. First of all, to the Our Health Advisory Committee, and I want to shout out to three people. First of all, Sandy Boucher, who thought this would be a great topic and put all her heart and soul into making it happen. She was assisted by Ted Chivers and Holly Archer. So to the three of you, thank you very much. To our sponsors, our 7 sponsors, thank you. I will acknowledge each one of you individually a little later in the program. And to those at Rogers TV, TJ, Mandy, Jen, Kevin, thank you very much. And to Jared at the MCC, appreciate your support and the work that you do for us every day. I want to ask you to join us for our next program. And TJ, if you would put that slide up for me. It's called COVID-19 Vaccination Saving Lives. We thought that that would be a very timely topic. It's 4 weeks tonight. That's March 25th. And we have 2 experts joining us, Dr. Colin Lee, who's the Associate Medical Officer of Health for Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit. Colin has been living and breathing COVID for over a year now. And it most recently is one of the decision makers around the rollout and around the planning for vaccination. So we're looking forward to meeting Colin again. He's been on the Our Health program before. Kevin Young, familiar to the Our Health program as well, is a geriatrician and internist. He's the medical director of Waypoint Center for Mental Health Care. And he leads the geriatrics across the province. So why is Kevin coming to our event? Well, Kevin's got the first frontline experience. So Kevin managed with many others at Waypoint the outbreak and was also instrumental in sorting out the details around the vaccination program there. So he's not only been vaccinated, but he has vaccinated many other people. So we look forward to those 2 participating 4 weeks from tonight. Thanks. Tonight, we have an opportunity to discuss and learn about resilience. So for me, I use a pretty simple definition. It's the bounce back that I have, or anybody has, when they have a period of it, or something goes wrong, a period of adversity. That works for me, but I'm sure our panelists will have other interpretations and some other suggestions. We usually have a very structured program and a discussion with the speakers, and I'm going to step back from that a little bit. The speakers and I have all met before. We've had dinner together, not quite, a virtual dinner together. So we're just going to leave it a little looser tonight. There's only 2 specific things. Number 1, we are going to have a question and answer session, and that'll start at about an hour from now. And we are going to end shortly before 9 o'clock. And our goal is to put a smile on your face and a little bit of hope in your heart. So you'll know when it's over. You'll know those 2 points, okay? So at this point, I've asked each of our speakers if they would give us an overview of what they think resilience is, how it works for them in their professional life, in their personal lives. I've left it pretty unstructured. I've even left it so unstructured that I didn't tell which one was going to answer that. So I'll leave it up to the three of you to self-organize. Who wants to go first?
Well, I'm the oldest one here, so yeah. So my role both as a minister, congregational ministry for about 21 years, and as a psychotherapist, really is working in the whole area of resilience. That's what it's all about. We know the number one predictor of good mental health is the ability to be resilient. My own personal moment of awareness came around resilience at a conference in the mid-'80s, where a speaker who now is pretty well known around the world by the name of John Maxwell. He does a ministry called Enjoy out of Atlanta, but back then he was in San Diego. And he talked about an essay that was written by actually an insurance agent by the name of Albert Gray called The Common Denominator of Success. And he said two things that really struck me. The first one was, I don't have to survive. And he elaborated on the idea that most of the bad decisions we make in life generally derive from not a desire to thrive, but from a need to survive. And so he countered that by saying, I don't need to survive. It's not the number one. I'm not going to make it out of this world alive anyway, so I should aspire to something greater than that. But the other thing he talked about was the idea that what he called the common denominator of success. And what he boiled that down to is that he found when he surveyed those who were most successful in life, wasn't that they had any less challenge. It wasn't that they didn't have larger, it's not that they had smaller obstacles. It boiled down to they were willing to do those things that others were not willing to do. And so that leads to a discussion of resilience because, really when you think about it, there are two polarities that come with resilience. There is resilience itself, or the ability to bounce back, as you put it, Keith. But on the other side is risk aversion. There's no way to improve resilience without increasing your capacity to experience risk. So that's why it's a very important topic in psychotherapy. Nobody gets any better without feeling worse in some way. If you didn't need to push yourself, you wouldn't need to have psychotherapy in the first place. So it's just pushing in the right way and in the right amount. And so anyway, that's my personal story around it. I had that moment of awareness in the 80s that impacted the ability to help people with their own issues of resilience. And that's what I hope to be able to do today is add a little context around some things that can help people to improve their resilience.
John, Robin?
Sure, I'll go next. Personal story is I was in university, and it's a personal story because it involves my father. So we go through high school, we go elementary, high school, we're off to university. First year, you're taking courses, you're that student, and the family's at home. All of a sudden, you get a phone call that your father's had a heart attack. So all of a sudden, your life changes, and his life changed, but so did mine, because now I am thinking not just about me, thinking about more than just myself. So it was a bit of an eye opener for myself, but obviously for my father, because he was athletic. He played squash every morning, all that kind of stuff. Then all of a sudden, bang. So over time, that was 40 years ago. He's had a number of surgeries, but each one of them has been not as a result of any other issues. It has been preventative. But going back to resilience, he learned to take the help, I think was part of it. Take the help, take the assistance, listen to the people that were able to care for him, and then use that, and not look at it as a deficit, but look at how his life can change and for the positive. And personally, it affected me because I changed my own personal behavior based on what I saw, that how he changed his and the effects that way. So I think that it's resiliency is multifaceted, and sure, as we get through the evening, we'll find through everyone's stories that and examples and what have you, that resiliency is a learned experience, and hopefully it's not from a place of trauma or stress or so on. It can be learned in other ways. So that's my story.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Robin.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, Glenn and John. It's great to hear your perspective. So I think as a behavioral scientist, I study resiliency in a way where we have really deconstructed what resiliency looks like in terms of what we can see and how it all works together, Keith. So in the work that I've done, and I've been exploring this construct for about 20 years, and what we've identified is that resiliency very much is this constellation of different skill sets. So I absolutely echo what John says, that it's learned, and what Glenn says, it's through adversity that sometimes we come upon what's available to us. Now, in my particular work, we've identified that there's actually 5 traits that we see with resilient people. And I've studied resilient people all around the world, all over Canada, North America, and the Middle East even. One of the things that we've come upon is that first and foremost, persons who can practice resiliency, who can bounce back, who can show up despite the challenges, are persons that have a sense of belonging. You need to have a home team. You need to have people in your corner that are going to protect you and that you are also going to protect. We need to get our psychological safety from those people closest to us. Now, it's not always our family. It could be our chosen persons that we surround ourselves with, but it's about belonging. We also see it has a wee bit to do with perspective and how we see the world and our attitudes and how we perceive challenges. We know our mindset, and this idea of an alignment between our head and our heart is so important to be able to decision and problem solve. We also see there's an element of acceptance, and acceptance in theory has always been so straightforward. We just need to deal with it. But in practice, learning how to do acceptance can be very challenging. It really comes down to learning how to decipher your controllables. Another variable that we see in my work, Keith, that we came upon, and you've touched on it already with your intention for us here this evening, is the notion of hope and choosing to live hope-filled. And I've done a lot of work with our military members, and they really taught me those lessons about what hope looks like during challenging seasons. And lastly, when we think about characteristics and resiliency, we identify humor. We actually know pockets of joy, moments of merriment, being able to laugh, even in difficult seasons, is going to be a strategy that's going to help people find a way through. And I always love that the biology really backs that up. So for example, when you laugh, your body releases a natural tranquilizer. It blocks your pain receptors just for that brief moment so you can catch your breath. And what I believe about resiliency, and again, all the way from toddlerhood to elderhood, it's a season of hellos and goodbyes. We figure things out, we learn, we let things go, and we make our next best choice. So from an academic perspective and a practitioner perspective, that's how I've explored resiliency. And as the evening goes on, I'm sure we'll hear more about kind of personally how I explore resiliency, but I think that's how I see it to get us started.
So let me ask our panel, do you consider yourself a resilient person? John?
Yes.
I that's a great question. If I reflect on what I've experienced, been through, however you want to phrase it, over my lifetime, I think that the obstacles have been put in the way, and I've been able to overcome, some better than others. So I believe that so to answer your question, yes, but I believe that everybody was probably on a spectrum of resiliency due to what experiences they've had, and the supports, as Robin said, definitely on the supports that have been provided to them, to either overcome the obstacles, or once those are overcome, to move along, and not be put in that situation, or be able to come out of that situation in a different spot. But I think that everyone is on a continuum of being resilient. It just depends on their experience.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that question of myself, am I resilient? Most of the time. And so I guess what I want to hear tonight is, how do I be that way all of the time? Or how do I recognize when I'm not being? That's what I'm listening for. Glenn, what about you?
Yeah, I feel a lot as John described. I would call myself a resilient person. In fact, I believe that the Serenity Prayer, which is used in a lot of 12-step groups, which basically says, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, is one template that I use for examining what's going on in my life. A lot of the angst that people feel is in not knowing which one of those streams they're actually sitting in. When it's time to experience serenity, it's not a changeable matter. When it's time to step up and risk with courage, and of course it takes wisdom to know those things. But I think for all people, some things can happen in life that are so large and so difficult that all of the positive thinking in the world isn't going to change it, and you need to change yourself. And so resilience looks different in a situation like that. It's a moment of acceptance. And so I think that for the most part, I've been through some significant challenges in my life. The more difficult ones required more time. You can't rush through this. It's a soul matter. You have to do your due diligence with yourself. But it goes back to this idea I was sharing earlier, that you have to be willing to step into that tension and take some calculated risks to move yourself along. And some challenges are more difficult to do that than others. But yeah, ultimately, I think that's always my goal.
Okay. Robin, do you want to make some comments? I can't imagine you're not resilient. I'm sure you are resilient with all the things you do. But have you always been resilient? Are you always resilient? This gradation or the scale that Glenn talked about?
Yeah, so I know I'm resilient, and I know everyone has the capacity to be resilient. I see it every single day in my work. I also know that I'm resilient, and I'm going to just digress momentarily just to give you a wee bit of my origin story as to how I started studying human resiliency, because I think that would put this in perspective and help to answer that question you posed about, like, that notion of that unevenness and about our resiliency. Some days we have more capacity, other days we're a wee bit more challenged. That's the nature of resiliency. It's not static. It's meant to ebb and flow. And very briefly, I can let you know that I was born into a household where resiliency is in our DNA. Like, we grew up in a culture where we were told that we can do hard things. And I remember my mother, since I was a little girl, would say, Robin could do hard things. And I really had no idea what my mother was talking about. But when I came into my 16th year, Keith, I was in a very dark place. I had a very tumultuous adolescence. I already had dropped out of high school by grade 10. I was navigating mental health challenges. I was navigating a significant addiction, and everything was pretty unpositive, like really negative for my family and I. And we had psychologists and psychiatrists say my parents should just count me out. This woman will not make 18. And when I was in that darkest season of my life, Keith, I also happened to get my driver's license. My family lived in rural Ontario, so there was no transit. So I got my driver's license. And I recall I had my driver's license for 1 week. And one night I was driving home alone by myself in the middle of the night, and I was on a deserted road, and a snowstorm rolled in very quickly. And within moments, I lost control of that car. And the car went off the road and went down an embankment, and my vehicle crashed through the ice. And my vehicle sank in the Otonabee River with me trapped inside. Within moments, my car was completely engulfed in water, lost in the channel. Now, I recall in that moment, Keith, that I wasn't actually feeling afraid. I very much was feeling angry. I was angry that I could not protect my parents, especially my mother, from what was about to happen, that her daughter was going to die trapped in a car. And when I started to think about my mom, it was as if there was this emotional echo that rang through my bones that says, Robin does hard things. And I made the decision in that moment to try to survive. And I remember I had my winter boots on, my winter coat. I couldn't even get the seatbelt off because of the water pressure. And there was no way I could have opened that car door. So I had to go through the driver's door window. Now, I remember getting out there and I couldn't figure out which way was up or down. They estimate my vehicle was 20 feet underwater. And I recall that I realized the only way I could get my bearings in that situation was to let go of my breath. I'd been holding my breath the whole time. And when I let go of my breath, I knew my bubbles would rise. And I recall swimming after those bubbles. The next thing that happened, I remember there was this hot ripping pain along my face, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. But then I realized it was actually my face hitting the ice because I was pinned under the ice. The vehicle had crashed a hole in the ice, but I'd been dragged farther downstream. I swam deeper into the channel, deeper into the dark, deeper into the unknown. Eventually, in the middle of the channel of the Trent Severn, I was able to get onto an ice shield. And there was a man that night by the name of Joseph. And he just happened to see my car tracks go off that road. And he just happened to decide to drive along the side of the road to see if he could see anyone. He came upon my body out on the ice. He crawled out onto the ice. He brought a chain from his pickup truck, wrapped the chain around my body, and dragged me to shore. And he was awarded the Governor General's Award for bravery for risking his life to save a stranger. And I recall when I woke up in the hospital, Keith, my mother was there. And my mother asked me, Robbie, how did you get yourself out of that? And I looked at my mother and I said, you told me I could do hard things. And she said, dear Lord, child, that is not what we were talking about back then. But that was the origin story when I came upon something in the human condition that I don't think is anomaly. I don't think it's an anomaly within me. It's something that I believe in comebacks. I believe that people are able to find their way through situations that they never even imagined. And I see that in my work every single day. People are stronger than they give themselves credit for. So when people ask me if I'm resilient, I'm a little bit biased because I'm pretty confident I am.
Yeah, I think so. So. We'd all say that. So you describe an incident which is pretty dramatic,
Yes.
Being stuck in a car, and something that you'll never forget.
Mm-hmm.
How bad does the adversity have to be for resilience to kick in? Like, for some people, I don't know, having aches and pains in the morning is like tough stuff for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to be resilient to get out of bed. What you described was something just totally different. How do people appreciate that difference?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I don't want to take up everyone's time, but what I think about with resiliency is that resiliency, and Dr. Viktor Frankl, the late psychiatrist who wrote about suffering, I think he said it so brilliantly in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a Holocaust survivor who developed logotherapy. He said, it doesn't matter what the pain is, it's like a gas and it fills up your entire being. It fills all of you up. So it doesn't matter if it's aches or pains in the morning, or if it's the loss of a loved one, it's going to completely fill up your entire body. Mm-hmm. And the piece, like the art or the science or the craft of what we think about in resiliency is, are you going to make the next right choice? Are you going to make the next right choice? You don't have to be resilient every day, all the time. It's a matter of what's the next right decision that you can make. And that's when it comes into perspective, choosing to be hope-filled, choosing that come what may, you're going to be able to figure it out. So again, I don't think we can ever compare challenge. I don't think we should compare heartaches and disappointments and difficult seasons. It's as unique as each and every one of us.
Yeah, yeah. John, you're the teacher here. Robin said, my mother told me, and it's in my DNA. It's in my DNA. So does that mean when you're teaching your students, can you figure out which one's got it and which one doesn't? Because it's hereditary? Like is that what we're saying here?
So I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. So I think that Robin had those caring people around her that kept telling her the right things. And then as she was going through the adversity, obviously just those simple phrases were concrete enough to get her through that adversity she was put in, which is pretty dramatic. From an educator standpoint, I'm going to look at it slightly different. So I believe anyone can become resilient. It just depends on how we get them there. So I look at, Robin had an event, but probably there was many small things leading up to her being able to survive that event. So I look at resiliency as not necessarily an event, but a series of experiences, shall we say. So in education, what we try to do is to put students in the right spot for getting them out of their comfort zone. So we look at a controlled situation in a classroom. We frame everything, we scaffold everything, we prime everything so that they have the tools, we practice certain things, and then the next step to become proficient at something is to put them in a situation where they have to practice their skills. So in education, we use a phrase that it's okay to fail. So you only learn by failing. If you do everything right 100% of the time, or somebody does it for you when you are having difficulty, you will not learn those pieces to become resilient. It's about a skill. And Robin talked about, the 5, I believe it was skills. Is that right, Robin? Of resiliency, and it's building a skill level. And ideally, if everything was in its right spot, we would learn how to become resilient in a controlled practice situation. But that's not what life is. But if we can have examples, and within a classroom, I see it every day, where it's science class, math class, doesn't matter, but people have practiced things, and then the teacher says, okay, here's something, I need you to solve it. If a student can transfer those skills and work through that, then that's really what we want, that outcome for being resilient, because now there's a roadblock and how I'm going to solve it. So you could learn something in one class, but transfer those skills to something else, or as simple as, you've been pushed and then brought back, pushed, and then people have helped you solve things. And then when you are put in an adverse situation, hopefully you're able to bring that skill set. It's not a DNA thing that, okay, or you get a certificate, now I'm resilient. It's those skills, so that when you're put in a situation, you bounce back before you bounce back, by going back to what you have learned and being able to apply it as needed. Doesn't work 100% of the time. Not everybody is at that level. Some students struggle through certain pieces when they're faced with roadblocks, but that's where the education system and other supports, be it friends, family, community, the church, it doesn't matter, but those supports are there to guide people through, so that they're able to the next time be able to work through that on their own. Because ideally, there's wraparound supports, but those supports aren't always going to be there 100% of the time, right? Robin was by herself on a road. She didn't have her parents there that she's lived with for, been around for 18 years, or friends, or what have you. It was her and then a stranger that had the positive outcome.
Mhm.
So I think that it's not a DNA thing. I think it's the possibility to become resilient through gaining that experience and then being able to transfer that to multiple situations.
One of the reasons we wanted to get into this was how do you teach people to be resilient? And my reading would suggest that the younger, the better.
Yes.
And so how do we get that message to our viewers that whether it be their grandchildren, their children, how give us some tips on what you would do. What do you do with your kids to better prepare them in terms of being resilient? That
I think all of us are going to have different answers to this. So I'll let Glenn go first.
I think before I go there, I just wanted to mention, number one, that story, Robin, was quite amazing. That you experienced that awesome challenge that you faced and you overcame. Some of you will be familiar with the book by David Peltzer, A Boy Named It, I think was the title of the book. He was the most abused child ever to come into the system in the state of California. His mother had schizophrenia. She had kept him in a closet and fed him dog food. They found when they did x-rays that nearly every bone in his body that could be broken had been broken. The incident that brought him into the hospital on this occasion was he had been branded on his rear end with a hot stove element. And today he's a perfectly well-organized man on the speaking trail talking about the subject of forgiveness. I first saw him on the Oprah Winfrey Show some years ago. But here's a guy that by all definition should not have done well in life, should not have had resilience, and yet he was able to forgive his mother and live a very productive life right up to this moment and help many other people. So I think that there is an innate quality of resilience that some have. I think we have to acknowledge that. Some people, by virtue of their personalities, have more emotional mettle to face things than others do, and that's not a choice. We also know, though, from the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that those who do not experience the social, when you come to the social determinants of health, people who do not have the kinds of supports that they need in early life do end up with lower distress tolerance, and the vector of their life does lend itself towards early death. Now, that's just a fact. That's what the stats say. So we also have to acknowledge when we're talking about resilience is that we're not working on an even playing field here. Those who've had a lot of adverse childhood experiences have less distress tolerance. They have less wiggle room to experience stress. And so we may wonder why that person reacts so profoundly to something that they should be able to handle with ease. Well, until you know the whole story, until you know what's underneath that, you cannot really appreciate why this person may not have the same level of distress tolerance. So the goal always has to be, because I agree completely that anyone can learn resilience. I also know that practicing it is more difficult for some and requires more effort. And to go back to Robin's original statement, more of a family, more support around you. So, so that's the piece that I wanted to add to that whole conversation. There may be some in our audience, for instance, who wonder why they don't have the same amount of distress tolerance as others around them. And I don't want them feeling as though they're doing something wrong. They may not have less distress tolerance for any reason other than the fact that life has handed them less distress tolerance. But what we want to give is some solutions that anybody can use that can help them to start where they are, because everyone has to begin where they're at, and start to increase that distress tolerance over time. And it's by doing that that resilience grows and increases.
Robin, do you have any tools that you use to I don't want to say teach, build resilience is the word I'm looking for. And let's transition a little bit from kids to adults, recognizing that the more work we've done as a child, the easier it's going to be. But give us some thoughts that you might have.
So for me, my lens for building resilience in anyone is a cognitive behavioral principle known as systematic desensitization. So what that essentially means is people are averse to risk for a reason. And so fear has to be challenged with, in some way, pushing against the boundary of that fear in order to increase their ability to experience whatever anxiety is they're experiencing. So for me, it's deeply personal. I can't just apply a principle broadly. I have to know, what is it that you're struggling with? What is it that you're having difficulty overcoming? What's holding you back? And once you know that you can work with the person to help them to identify what they need to do just to stretch that. And the key to a person building resilience is they have to feel successful in stretching that boundary a bit. There are techniques with anxiety disorders where they flood you right out of control, and then sometimes that does burst the bubble and people become well, but that doesn't happen as frequently as when people gradually are given the opportunity to be successful in stretching their boundary. So systematic desensitization does that. So if I give you the classic example, if somebody is unable to ride in an elevator, we're not going to send them up the Empire State Building the first time. What you want to do is maybe get them to get on the elevator, go up one floor and get off and feel successful that they actually made it into that elevator and off. And they're going to feel awful about it, but you want them to keep doing that until going up a floor is no longer giving them the same amount of anxiety. Well, anything that requires resilience has an example like that. Something is causing enough anxiety to keep me in my comfort zone, and that comfortable place that I'm in is not a healthy spot. So that would be my approach. That's my lens.
Robin, do you want to weigh in on your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. And just thank you. And I'm just enjoying listening to everyone speak on the panel so much. So just for one quick little clarification and then jump into some tools. When I mean that like my resiliency is in my DNA, I'm not suggesting that we're born with it or we're not born with it. It's something that I believe that a person needs to internalize. It has to do with the label or the way that we see ourselves. And very much our family influences it, our culture, our identity, our experience, that all creates this self-script or what we call self-talk. So I refer to it as being in my DNA, but it's something that was added based on learned experience. So it's not something you're born with or not born with, but absolutely, as Glenn said, there's certain traits or personalities that help you have more resources to potentially work with. So just to clarify, I don't want people to think like, oh shoot, I missed the lottery.
You had a family who reinforced all the things that you were feeling too. A very comfortable place to be. Is that right?
Yeah, but I also think each and every one of us, when we look at our ancestry, we're all indigenous to somewhere, and we all come from persons who've experienced challenge and change, and they've had to figure it out. When you think of the fact that we are the most evolved version of our family lineage, like we do come from a long line of persons who have been able to problem solve and critically think and find their ways through difficult situations. Even when we think of our immigration stories, or if we are settlers here or we're indigenous to Canada, every generation has had to learn and to adapt and to grow. So I do believe we do have that kind of in our favor. In terms of when I'm working with adults, and again, I work with adults all across the different spectrums. For me, what I really focus on, and I really honor what Glenn said in his approach to cognitive behavioral therapy, what I also use in my practice is very much this idea of emotional regulation. You got to be okay in the moment to be able to make the next right decision. So the tools that I spend a lot of time working with people is understanding how really their emotional biology works. So we have our drive system, right? That's what gets you going in the morning. It helps we motivate you, get things done. We have that threat system that goes off in our head that lets us know that there's danger. And for many of us in the current landscape, Keith, this alarm or this our nervous system has been so activated with COVID. Things have been changing. We're feeling wobbly. It's because our alarm system in our head is letting us know that this is dangerous. It feels unsteady right now. Now, how we combat, or the antidote to when we're feeling really anxious, I think it has to do with our soothing system. And you have to be able to self-regulate to then be able to make the next right choice. So when I'm working with people, and anywhere from like a soldier to a teenager or an elder, I always encourage them to make sure they can catch their breath, right? A deep inhalation in and a nice slow exhalation out. Regulating is so important. So many people are spinning. There's so much mental chatter. There's so much restlessness. We got to get grounded. One of my favorite, I can tell you real quick, one of my favorite activities to work with persons, we call it birthday cake breathing. And what you do is you take a deep inhalation in, and then you imagine blowing out your birthday candles, like literally just blow out your birthday candles and bring your nervous system into rest. Now, I can tell you in full disclosure, I was doing that just a wee while ago, and one of our teenagers walked by and he stopped and he's like, "Mama, you're doing birthday cake breathing." And I said, "Yes, Jackson, I am, because I'm feeling a wee bit worked up." And then he watched me birthday cake breathe, and then he started to laugh. And I asked him why he was laughing. And he said, "Mom, I can't believe how many candles you have on your birthday cake." And he's like, "You literally have no chill." And he was absolutely right. In the season of COVID and being of service and worrying, I kind of lost that chill, just that ability to trust, that steadfast trust that we're going to figure this out. And we don't know what it looks like, but we are confident that come what may, we will figure it out. But we have to be in a place of emotional regulation to be able to make the next right choice, to be able to listen, to learn the tools. If we're not regulated, we're not going to be able to help others who are dysregulated either.
John, how do you advise your teachers? Because I would think in your job, a lot of your work is directly with teachers now rather than maybe with students. I'm not sure, but let's suppose it is. They're going through a period which it's prolonged. The outcome is oftentimes unknown. Some of the things that are going on are totally out of their control. How do you create for them the hope? Because those teachers are going to be role models for the students that we all want to be resilient too. So how do you help them?
So I really liked what Robin was saying about the self-regulation and being able to realize within yourself. So Robin was doing something that she naturally does because this is what she does, but working with people to be able to key into what those self-regulation pieces are. So I'm going to go to something I know. When I was a principal at Georgia Bay District Secondary School, we focused the vast majority of our education on four things: physical wellness, mental wellness, emotional wellness, and spiritual wellness. Because our belief was that if people, the whole entire school community, from students, custodians, teachers, educational assistants, anybody that's in the building, if those four things are in a good spot, I will say, or alignment, whatever vocabulary you want to use, then the whole place will be, including each individual. So we've been put into a spot that no one's doing with COVID and being able to being forced to adapt in different ways. And I use this phrase frequently: the ball keeps moving. So we have to look at, where have we been, what are we doing, and how can we use those things to get through to where we get to the new norm, shall we say. But I think that having people focus on that, their own wellness, is going to be the big changing point. So, I mean, lots of smart people in schools, students, adults, the whole bit, but making sure that everybody is aware of themselves and then those around them, and not allowing the situation to become the dominant factor. So we're doing quite well in education. Everybody is working well to try to get through something that nobody has ever come across before. Not too many people lived through the pandemic 100 years ago. I'll tell you that right now. But they've learned, society, governments, and so on, have learned from that experience, and they're using that to try to get through this. So this is the event that we're going through that will make people resilient. I truly believe, and I think at the end of this, this is that learning piece. And if people are learning to work within this uncomfortable zone, when we get out, we'll be ahead of the game. I think we are learning new ways to teach. We are learning new ways to learn, new ways to communicate. And I think that if the key, I think, is everyone working together, and that involves everyone, including on this panel. A couple of weeks ago, I actually heard Robin talk, and in an event I was at. There's mental health workers. There's many supports within the educational system, within the community, within the county. Everyone is focusing on the well-being of everyone, because that truly, I think, is what's going to get us through this event, this trauma, stress, adversity, whatever you want to call it, and out the other end. And we're going to learn from this, and we're going to be, I think, better off in the end, because even if it's learning the simple piece about birthday breathing in the educational system, or the audience here, and that's what they take away from this, that's the bonus, and that's where they're going to become resilient, because the next time they get into a traffic jam because the roads are bad, and they start getting all anxious and so on, they can use a strategy and come out and be in a better place, hopefully, from that, as opposed to having to be put into a therapeutic situation or those other kinds of things. If we learn from the things that are given to us, and we have that aha moment, this is how I dealt with this, I'm coming out the other end, I'm going to use that what I have learned. And this is the point we are with education, is we've been put into this situation, and everybody's in it, and kids have to go to school and so on. And we've learned to work within what we've been given. And I think in the end that anybody from 4 years old, 5 years old to 65 within the educational system is going to gain a bit of resilience that they can take with them through life.
So from practical point of view, Glenn, I know you told me that you were still going into the hospital. You're not doing all your work from home, which is hard. Working from home and helping people is hard. How do you recognize somebody who needs help? Do they come to you, or are there some things that you pick up along the way, and does it help you to go to them? How do you manage that part?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, there are people who seek me out and seek out members of our team, and others in the hospital as well that are known to have the ability to support others. So there is that piece. But yeah, I have my eye open if I see someone who I think is struggling. I did that very recently in the last couple of days. I noted in a meeting that one of my colleagues looked as though they could use a call, and it worked out to be that was the case. So yeah, I think that when we talk about being in this together, it is important that, because not everyone's going to reach out. Guys are notoriously bad at it. And mostly, women do tend to be more quick to talk out some of their issues with a friend than guys who tend to hold things closer to the vest. I use Pareto's principle when I say that. It's probably 80-20, but because it's not a universal thing. But I find that when it comes to like this pandemic, and this is probably the largest example of the need to be able to be resilient on a massive scale that we've known in our lifetimes. What I've been sharing at Waypoint is that, if it isn't going to change, we have to embrace the problem. And then this isn't going to change. If it's going to change, and there's so many parts of that maybe aren't going to change, like working from home, not being in meetings, not having hallway meetings, not being able to see your friends or your family. If every morning when I wake up, I'm bemoaning the fact that my life isn't what it was 14 months ago, that's just like, that's going to further erode my ability to be resilient in this moment. So you have to embrace it. Sometimes I like to say befriend it. There's always something for you in it. So embrace the problem and then truly give yourself to it and identify what you can do. Like in any situation, there's something we can do. Like we know that that anxiety basically is the feeling of loss of control. And so if we find something that we can control, rather than fussing about the fact that we cannot control this, actually identify what we can control and do that, then we can increase our sense of agency with it, and that improves our mood in the moment and our resilience. So if we really focus on that and identify what we can do and do it, that's important. And then again, you mentioned focusing on others is always a great way to take some of the pressure off yourself. Like everybody's struggling right now. If I focus on my own struggle, my struggle becomes worse. If I'm looking more outward and saying, how can I walk with somebody else and help their experience be better, I'm going to improve not only their experience of this moment, I'm going to improve mine as well. So, I mean, those are some of the principles that I think I've been trying to share those at Waypoint. Mm-hmm. Written one article about that, and I've had a chance to talk with our managers about that. I think it's a pretty well received concept because it's something that we can all do.
Robin, do we need to change our expectations? So, driven people put expectation out in front of them, and sometimes it's pretty ambitious. Mm-hmm. But there are certain things going on now that some of those things aren't going to happen easily. It's just, that's the way it is. It's nobody's fault. It's just not going to happen. So do we consciously need to think about what are our goals, and do we need to think about them differently?
It's a really interesting question. I think very much when you're using the word kind of expectations, what I think this event has really brought to the forefront is the need to really reflect on our priorities. I think it's not necessarily a matter of our expectations of how things are going to fold. I really think people's priorities are really being challenged, and people have I think people are struggling right now, Keith, because there's not clarity with what their priorities are. People are struggling to be able to find that life with work balance. We might feel as though our family is our priority, but now with these working environments and these challenges, we're feeling really pulled, and we might not be showing up for our family systems the way we wish to be or want to be. So for me, I think it's a matter of recalibrating our priorities, so that way our priorities are matching our time and the behaviors and the energy that we're actually putting out. I think also too that there has to be this opportunity when we also have a really important conversation about the fact that we actually need rest. We have crossed this threshold at 11 and a half months of navigating a global health pandemic and a needed racial reckoning that's unfolding, political uncertainty. We've gone through a lot as a group of collective citizens over the last 11 and a half months. People are tired. And I referred to a group this morning, I was talking about our tired is tired. We're bone tired, we're weary, we're wobbly. And when I think about priorities, I feel as though people are really kind of almost holding their breath in terms of like, I'll look after myself once this is over. Once things go back to normal, then I'll take care of my health. Then I'm going to reconnect. Then I'm going to feel well again. We got to feel well during the storms. We can't just wait for the sunny days to then be like, okay, now I'm going to recover. Now I'm going to do, whether it be relationship repair or kind of addressing some of the self-neglect
that I see people have been doing. People have accepted that this is how they're always going to feel. And I feel as though a lot of folks have lost hope, and we got to get that hope back. I love that when we think, and I know that John mentioned about the Spanish flu in 1918. What came after the Spanish flu was the raging 20s. People got dressed up to go to the grocery store. People had parties in the streets because they were just so tired of being wobbly and weary and scared. So I feel as though we can learn lessons about the fact if we reprioritize, we make what matters most matter most, set realistic expectations of what can we do. As Glenn said, we have to have that agency of control of what's possible for us personally. And we're going to start feeling a little bit better. And maybe we'll identify that we're not actually defeated. We're just a little depleted right now, and we all need a dose of rest.
So tell us how we get that rest.
Yes.
You're all busy people. You've got people that are dependent on you. It's not as if you can say, I'm going to the spa for a weekend. I'm just going to zone out and I'm not going to take my iPhone with me.
Yeah.
Those days don't happen much anymore. So how do we get that rest? John, Robin, what do you think?
Sorry, I'd just like to add to what Robin said, and I completely agree about we need to look at it, and we need to slow down. And I actually, when I look around, and I actually noticed it probably once the summer hit, and we were still in some restrictions, and we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. And I was reflecting on myself, those around me, work, etc., and I noticed that things were slowing down because we were forced to at some point, right? We opened up again, and then it went like, okay, I got to make up for last time. But we were forced that we could not go out except to the grocery store. We could not do certain things, etc. And if you look at a negative, through negative lens, being at home and there's all this activity around, and I can't get to work and I can't do all those things, and that's looking at it through one lens. But if you look at, I don't have to commute. I can actually go upstairs and make a sandwich, and I don't have to do whatever. I'm saving money on coffees, whatever it is, and things slowed down. It wasn't the karate lessons, it wasn't the ski, it wasn't XYZ. And you spoke about going to the spa as a relaxation, but really it's an effort. You got to book it, you got to go, and then there's somebody doing it for you. Whereas I think that we were forced at some point in this 11 and a half months to look at ourselves, and we actually were forced to slow down. And I think that might have, for some that looked at it as a positive, it's going to reboot them. And as Robin said, we will probably hit the roaring 20s again. Mm-hmm. But hope, in a positive way, I hope that people will look at this experience and not go, I have to make up for lost time and I'm going to work twice as hard.
I like your phrase, inner reboot. In fact, I read something the other day that said we are all bored. No question, we have less to do. We have less exciting things going in our lives, but maybe we shouldn't look at it as being bored. Instead, we're time rich. So that's that. How do we look at things differently? Comments?
I love that. That's perspective. And on that notion of rest, if I can just kind of bring that back just for a moment, I think a lot of times when we think about the rest that we need and using this time, given these blessings that we have more time, Keith, when I think about rest, I think a lot of folks think about physical rest, right? Like sleeps and naps. And that's what people think about. The rest that I'm talking about is we actually need to rest from being productive. We need to be able to take time off of, even if we're working remotely or at home where we're not being productive. We need to actually do that without a feeling of guilt. Mm-hmm. And we also need a bit of a rest from all of this idea of always being of service to others. And I want us to be servants to other persons. We're called to be, but you need moments when you're actually not being helpful. Like you actually have to get some stillness. Like you need to be able to recharge. If our cell phones were as empty as we are right now, we would all be finding a way to charge it. But right now we're letting ourselves go into empty, and you can't pour pour from an empty vessel. If you want to keep showing up for your patients, your students, your members of your family, you actually have to have some breaks from always being productive. We also need a bit of a break from knowing things, in terms of like being the person who's like knows all the news and knows what's on the horizon. We actually need to take a little bit of breaks from all of the negative news and all of the worry that's out there. We have to have some moments of stillness. I also think people need some rest with their own thoughts. Your thoughts need a gentle place to land in your mind. We have to take off that pressure that we're putting on ourselves, that we're supposed to be doing this one right way. There's no one right way to do a global pandemic. Life's hard, but it's not because we're doing it wrong. Right now, it's just a matter of we're doing the best we can. And I also think we also need a bit sometimes of a rest from always doing things. We need to actually be bored. We actually, and especially our children, my favorite thing to do with little ones is to take them out and do walking and wondering. Like just take them outside and just ask them, like, what do you think this is? What do you think that's called? Like just giving them a chance to just experience nature, just go back to the things that we know that matter and are so crucial for our development. So I think we need a little bit of a rest from all the scheduling. And I think that's going to help people recalibrate. So it's not just the physical rest, emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, we got to get ourselves back in alignment.
Sorry, Keith, can I add to that for a second?
Sure.
I completely agree with what Robin said, and I'm going to bring it back to resilience. And this is what I believe. I think that, and I go from education, if you are not changing approaches, or if you're on that high energy, drive, I think that Robin was alluding to, whatever you learn is not going to be ingrained. So if I go with resiliency, I truly believe that if you have a moment of trauma, let's say stressing, whatever it is, you need a chance to come down for it to be learned, and then you can use it again. You need a bit of downtime, because if you learn it, and Robin, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the soldiers that you're working with, I will bet that they're in a certain place because they're on, anybody that's service, police, fire, the military, they're on 24/7, and they will learn from being in stressful situations. But unless they have the time to be down and reflect on it, it becomes a negative.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that with resilience, we all talk about having that event or having that thing and being more resilient and going through. But if you don't have the opportunity to let it be ingrained and those skills, it's just going to be more of a stressful moment, and you're not going to learn from that piece.
I have one thing to add to that, Keith.
Just a short break here, an intermission for my sponsor break, and then we'll come back to some questions that I've been accumulating here, and Jared's been picking up from our audience, and some that came in earlier. So TJ, you'll show the slide of our sponsors' logos. We have 7 wonderful sponsors for the Our Health program. They not only provide money, they provide us with support. They're our go-to people when we want to know what the community wants. So 2 individual healthcare providers, Andy Audia at the Audia Hearing Aid Center. They have outlets across Simcoe County. Dr. Anita Federici and Associates, and their organization now is referred to as the Center for Psychology and Emotion Regulation. So thank you to the 2 of you. We also have 2 large healthcare organizations, the Hillcrest Village Care Center. Lots of challenges with looking after people who are in the later stages of their lives. And I'm sure that compared to a month ago when we thanked them, now that many of their patients and their families and caregivers had COVID, they're feeling a whole lot better. And to Georgian Bay General, who went through a very, very difficult, talk about having something to gain resilience up there. They had an outbreak many of their staff, many patients, some unfortunate deaths, and they're doing a great job now. They're out of that, but I'm sure lots of work has got them there. So 3 other new sponsors this year: LabX Media, who are returning as a sponsor, and their scientific group. David Mink Insurance, a subsidiary of McDougall Insurance now, and Lois Lipton from the Lipton Group. We thank you, all of you, for providing us with the dollars that make this happen, and you're truly appreciated. So thank you. So at this point, I would like to flip into some questions. There's one here that's kind of burning on me. It's can I make a mistake as I try to build resilience? And how do I avoid making mistakes?
Can I jump in real quick, and then I'm going to pass it to Glenn, because I think Glenn was going to say something. As I say, I think, Keith, we talked about this yesterday on the call. As I always say to my children, don't waste a mistake. Learn from it. Like, don't waste a mistake. So I don't want you to ever even try to think that you're not supposed to make mistakes. I want you to just make sure you don't waste it. I want you to make sure you learn from it, figure something out, take a deep dive, because the next time you face another challenge, you're not going in as a rookie. You're going in with a wee bit of experience, the lesson that you learned from your mistake. So don't ever worry about making mistakes. They're just ways to gather data. It's going to give you good data. And I want to pass it over to Glenn, because I think he was just about to jump in and say something before our break.
Yeah, thank you. I would have said the same thing about mistakes. I mean, that even thinking about it as, worrying about whether you're making a mistake, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. And worrying about mistakes is a risk aversion strategy. And so dive in, learn from your mistakes. I would have said that as well. What I wanted to mention, Keith, and I just wanted to layer this in because I think it's an important point. It's not just getting rest from our work. It's the way we do our work. In the book Compassionomics, it talks about the fact that 40 seconds of compassion expressed to another person, releases a significant amount of dopamine and helps your own ability to feel good. And the person that you've worked with feels good. My wife tells me that she always knows when I've worked with the patients when I come home, because I'm not as tired, I've got more energy. And it's simply because, if you're truly present with someone and you're expressing compassion, and by compassion, I mean, you're actually really seeing them. You're not taking their burden upon yourself. I mean, empathy is the ability to appreciate another person's experience using your human instrument to have an appreciation. Sympathy is taking their emotion upon yourself, but when you're not doing that, you're using empathy. And if you do that and actually make a human connection, this study says it only takes 40 seconds of attention to someone, truly seeing them and expressing true compassion, to build enough resilience in yourself that you will avoid burnout. There was a guy on the news, a doctor working in a COVID unit that has not taken one day off since this COVID outbreak started. And the way he described his ability to do that is he gets such joy out of helping the people in the COVID unit. I mean, he's not in there, being all frustrated about the fact that people are dying all around him. He's looking at the opportunity he has to make a difference and a contribution. So anyway, I would add that as well. One way to make your rest times more meaningful is to make sure your work times are meaningful by actually seeing people in front of you.
There's a question here from personal experience during challenging times. My ability to be resilient was primarily a direct result of care and support from a loving partner. It was further reinforced by friends and relatives. Where and to whom should a person turn to when they don't have this support network?
Well, that becomes the first problem then, right? Generally, if you need help, the first step you need to take is to admit that you need it and reach out. Being a person of the cloth, being ordained clergy, I would say reach out to your priest, minister, rabbi. If that's not available to you, if you're not a person who sees faith as being meaningful, find a club or a support group, you have to take the first step to get yourself near people. So again, what can I control? I can't control the fact that I don't have a loving spouse that's going to help me. What I can control is whether or not that's what I'm thinking about, or if I'm going to take some small steps towards helping myself get near people that may then evolve into the kind of supportive community that I need. So, that would be what I would suggest to someone that I was working with. You need to take some small risks, put yourself into some place where community is possible.
Can you broaden that a little bit as we think about the current situation where we're in? We're kind of on lockdown, that meeting other people is not the public health's preferred choice, and that those clubs that you talked about, a lot of them are closed or virtual. Right. Other mechanisms, any one of you that we can call on now for the people that actually need a friend?
Pick up the phone, schedule a Zoom meeting. Take your dog to the dog park and socially distance. Yeah.
From
John, go ahead.
Sorry, I just quickly. In the educational system, we all know that children are in schools right now. So I think the system has built a very strong foundation for mental health and well-being across the system. So in Simcoe County, in every high school, there's a social worker attached to the alternative schools as well. In elementary schools, there's social workers, child and youth workers, but in every school, there's caring adults. So I know that students sometimes want to go to their friends, and their friends are a good support, but the friends aren't always the right support. So knowing that there's caring adults in the building, and it only takes one, and it could be anybody within the building. That's extremely important, and it could be a stranger. Somebody could just walk into the office, and I've never met that student before, but they've seen me in the hallway 100 times, and I'm just that familiar face, and they don't feel comfortable going to their teacher because they see them, once a week for a semester, but it's somebody different, and sometimes it's the school is the place to be. Sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes, because young people sometimes can't go to their families because of whatever situation it might be, or they think that they won't understand, and so on. But back to what Glenn said, the human piece, I think, is extremely important. I believe that, there's 4 things I talked about earlier about the wellness pieces, but being that 40 some odd seconds that Glenn referred to, I think is extremely important to not only the person who needs that person, but also the person that's giving that support. I think it's a two-way street, 100%.
Okay. Robin, anything to add to the challenges of the lack of companionship or lack of somebody to go to because of some things that are closed currently, and what do you suggest to people?
Yeah, so again, I echo first what Glenn said in terms about our faith for persons that are faith-filled. That's definitely where we can go. That there's always that open door, even if it's a Zoom call or it's a phone call. That's where people can, that's a safe space where people can go. I also echo what John says in the schools. Our K to 12 little ones, they're looked after in terms of there are caring adults that are there to look after. And there's also things like Kids Help Phone, making sure those phone numbers are just readily available. I always say to families, just always have that stuff on your fridge. Like, just let them normalize the fact that there is Kids Help Phone and things like that. And it might not be for your kid, but your kid might tell another kid about that service. So, just making sure it's just, we take away some of the stereotypes sometimes about seeking help or asking for help. And also too, I do believe that I appreciate our medical system's very tired right now, but I also know many family practitioners who, they care deeply about their patients, and, reaching out to your doctor if you're worried about the fact that if these feelings are big and you're not feeling like yourself, there's no shame in asking for help. And also, I always let folks know too, there is something pretty amazing about what happens when we do a practice, Keith, that's called free flow writing.
writing a letter to somebody you care about, writing a card. There's something very cathartic about putting our thoughts on paper. And sometimes it's easier to write things down than it is to say things. So again, just finding a way to express, to take that first step is so important. And also, I just would really want to reiterate for persons, a lot of people are feeling very alone right now. This is isolating. This is the part of, when we are socially distancing, we are away from people, but we are social creatures. And you know what? There's no shame if where you're getting your sense of fondness and attachment right now might be from your dog or your cat, or looking at old pictures, or enjoying your favorite books. It doesn't have to be big and radical. If you get your comfort by your cat and watching your favorite shows, just appreciate this. This is a season. It's not going to last forever. We know the recovery is going to be long, but it's just a season. We'll be back. We will get back together at some point. So just figure out what you need to do in the meantime, right? The meantime, make sure you're okay, ask for help. But again, just trust that this is just one of the seasons that we're going to have to navigate. We'll get back together.
This is a season. I like that. This question is rather direct here. It talks about, can we discuss the connection between resilience and our immune system? Who wants to take that one?
That's out of my expertise. I'll pass it on to my colleagues.
Well, we do know the mind-body connection exists and is very strong. How we think does affect how we feel, and not only how we feel, it affects our health.
Yes.
I mean, studies over and over again have said not only the way that we think, but the amount of support that we get when we're not well, and the amount of human connection we feel that we're getting. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we're not just bodies. Mm-hmm. We are body, mind, and spirit, however you see it. Mm-hmm. We have to have health in all three of those domains, and any one of those out of balance affects the other two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the research that we could use also to kind of scaffold on that is again, it's actually the Yerkes-Dodson human performance stress curve theory. Now, that's not new. It's been around since 1908. But what it does is it identifies what happens to the body when it is exposed to high levels of cortisol, that it actually moves people from stress into distress. And that's where we start to see an erosion and a breakdown in our immune system. So getting and hitting that place of burnout, which is really depleting our resources emotionally, psychologically, physically, and spiritually. So we do know prolonged seasons of distress aren't good for us. And that's why we want to make these little decisions every day to keep our stress in a way that's more manageable. We don't need to figure all of this out. It's literally just in that moment. What can we do to help navigate our daily stressors? It's super important.
There's a great book by Gabor Mate called When the Body Says No.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate, Gabormate, When the Body Says No. That is just excellent on this whole subject. An easy read, layman's language. I recommend it.
Thanks, Glenn. This is a health show, and in much longer than that, I have heard no medication hasn't been mentioned once. Is there any role for medication in building people's resilience, or is it something they should consider staying away from?
Well, medication sometimes gives you the edge you need to do the other work. So, medication is not the answer. If it's all that you're going to do is take medication plus the work that you need to do. But some people aren't going to be able to do that work unless they have a medication that helps them to get the edge they need to be able to start taking those steps.
Okay. How about things like marijuana, alcohol, give some relaxation, sense of relief? Is this a good idea? Is this individual? What's your suggestion? Robin, where would you weigh in on that?
Yeah, my suggestion when I'm working is I work with university students, obviously, and they're an at-risk population for experimenting and finding different ways to self-soothe and self-medicate. I'm a huge advocate of we really need to be in a movement practice. We need to be walking. We need to get outside in nature. We need to be able to just stretch. And I'm not talking about like exercise programs. I'm talking about like movement practices. So many people are so stuck inside, like emotionally stuck as well as physically with the quarantine. We have to get outside, even in the darker days of winter. There is no research that replicates the advantage of outdoors than any of the other type of depressants like you just mentioned. And especially, I think about it this way, when I'm working with people, especially who are navigating mental health and emotional health, I tend to see them kind of in two groups predominantly. One group is very stuck in the past, and that's rarely where we see that depression. There's a lot of regret, there's a lot of shame, and it's almost like they live in this fog. And on the other side, I see persons that are really forecasting the future, and they're very anxious, and they're really worried about a sense of control. And I think of that as like really big waves, like they're in this boat and these waves keep crashing over. One of the things that we know about regulating is that we want to try to bring some stability, and things that we know are reliable. It is going outside for a walk. It's connecting with people. Like those are going to be the things that actually make a big difference. And what I always encourage people, if you want to know, like, Robin, where do I even start? I always encourage people, like, when your morning is when you can set the tone for what kind of day you're going to have. I want you to build routine and ritual and rhythm in the morning that just really grounds you. And then you won't feel the need or that pull to so many of the other vices, because you've really done the work in the morning. And you know what? Being healthy takes a lot of work. Being unhealthy is a lot of work. So we got to pick our hard. They're both hard. Which hard are you more comfortable with? And the bonus in winning your morning is that you're less likely to get distracted, and set the intention on what kind of day you want to have. That's going to work, I think, in just my experience. I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm an educator, but in my practice, we see that health in a different way is more beneficial in the long run.
There's somebody here that has suggested, because we asked for tips, that yoga has been very helpful for this individual to make that connection with the outside, to give her a rest, to change the
Absolutely.
venue. So, do you have questions of each other, or questions that you think we've, some thoughts that we maybe missed?
I'd just like to add one other point to what Robin was saying. So I've experienced two things that I think would get someone through adversity. So one, definitely outdoors. I on myself, go for a walk every day, at lunch for just 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And that fresh air and oxygen is a huge difference, especially getting over that 2:00 fade that we all have. The other thing is, and I'm a big advocate of something I call collective positivism. So if you're in a group, no matter how big, how small, whether it's an entire organization, and there's happiness, or there's being nice, there's a positivity within there, it actually vibrates, it reverberates, and that can get people that are not in the right spot at that moment in time through that. I truly believe that when there's positivity around you, it can help you get through that stress, anxiety, strife that might be just a momentary thing for some people, or it might be something that's long. But when people are in a negative based situation, things will remain that way. If they're in
all these neat vibrations tonight, John? Absolutely.
It's good vibrations, just like the Beach Boys.
Good. There's another question here which talks about the difficulties in people that may not have money to put food on the table, and may not have shelter maybe in a crowded because they're living with the large members of their family, those other social determinants of health. And where do you start for these people? Because you want to help them, but where do you start?
Give them a sandwich. I mean, you got to start where they're at, right? I mean, you're not going to help someone solve the kinds of issues that we would need to address, increasing someone's resilience if they've got an empty stomach. So those are serious issues. When we look at our Indigenous communities and we talk about all of the injustices and the inequities that they've experienced, Canadians who don't appreciate the impacts of broken treaties and inequities in terms of clean water and education and access to good health care. We wonder why they struggle on some of the reserves across Canada with some of the social determinants of health. Well, the reason why is because we have not done what we needed to do in terms of being equitable with our Indigenous people. So if there are a microcosm that you can see all across Canadian society, if people are impoverished, if we're not meeting those needs, yeah, they're gonna end up having other issues in their life. That's what the ACE study says, and yeah.
How do we help others that are so much less unfortunate that it's far more than it's everything around them that's impeding their resilience?
And I know Robin wants to say something, and I'll be very quick because I know we're time sensitive, but being in education, I've seen thousands upon thousands of children. And honestly, I learn from everybody. The kids that come and they need that extra breakfast. They need this. They need various things. They need clothes. We help them out in the way. But I actually learn from them because, in all honesty, Keith, a lot of those children are extremely resilient because of some of the things that you mentioned, and Glenn said. I try to learn from those. I try to help as best I can. We try to do that as a system, but we also learn because I have learned from students that come to school, and that it's difficult. And I'm like, more power to you. You're here every day.
I'm getting a signal that I need to wrap up. Otherwise, I'm going to be way over time. So, and one of the things, so I apologize that I've got a little short here. One of the things that I want to do is sincerely thank our audience for joining us. I really do hope we have left you with a smile and some hope in your heart. I certainly feel that way, and I hope the rest of you do too. Sincere thanks to our three speakers. You've been a great group. You have controlled the messaging, and a tremendous amount of information has passed from you to us and to our viewers. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight, and for everything you do all the time, not just what you do tonight. You do this all the time, so thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
We'd like to hear from our viewers if they have any comments. Just use that mcc_ourhealth@outlook.com to send us your feedback. Love to hear from you. Thanks again to our 7 sponsors, and we look forward to seeing you 4 weeks tonight for COVID-19 vaccinations, saving lives. Thanks to everybody. Enjoy the rest of the evening and take home all these messages. Good night.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
I did it.
I need it.
The hero gave it. and I am alive.
As an organ donor, you can save up to 8 lives and enhance the lives of 75 others. Please go to our website. Pledge a gift of life. You'll be glad you did.
With NHL Center Ice, you get a premium ticket to the games you want every night of the season. Catch every key out-of-market matchup each week. You'll get more goals, more saves, more non-stop action from the teams you love.